In this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate two ways to approach the process of decreasing ribbing in pattern. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. What I have here is a swatch that was knit in Knit 2 Purl 2 ribbing. I have 30 stitches at the beginning. I have a multiple of 4 stitches plus 2. I wanted to start and end with a knit stitch. And here at the end, I have 14 stitches, again, starting and ending with a knit 2. And throughout the swatch, I was decreasing stitches just to the left of these first 6 stitches, the knit 2, purl 2, knit 2. I was decreasing to the left and maintaining stitch pattern. So that's what I'm going to show you today, is how do you maintain a stitch pattern when you're eliminating stitches from the repeat. How do you do that? So in this swatch, I only have decreases at one edge, but I'm going to demonstrate with decreases at both edges. So the first decision that you have to make is, where are the decreases going to begin? So what is going to be maintained as it was originally, and then where is the area where the decreases are going to occur? So what I'm going to do, I'm starting with a knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, and I want to maintain knit 2, purl 2, knit 2 at each edge. So I'm going to place a marker on the column of knit stitches, the last knit stitch in this column. And I'm going to do the same thing at this edge. I've got knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, so I'm going to place a marker on this column of stitches right here. So this is a representation of what it is I'm trying to do. I want to maintain knit 2, purl 2, knit 2 at the beginning and the end of the row, and then I want to gradually decrease just inside of those stitches. So what I'm doing first is eliminating this purl stitch, and then these purl stitches, and then this knit, and then this knit is how it's going to happen. When you work 2 stitches together, one of them ends up on top. Either the stitch on the right ends up on top, or the stitch on the left ends up on top. So in this case, what we want to be on the bottom is the stitch that's going to be eliminated. So that means that we can either have this knit stitch end up on top of the purl as we decrease, or we can have the next stitch in be the one that's on top as we decrease. So we're going to start with having this knit stitch be on top instead, and I'll explain more as we go. So all of the stitches up to this mark stitch are going to remain as they are in pattern, and then the first stitch to get decreased at is going to be this purl stitch. And at this end, this knit stitch and all the ones after that are going to be maintained in pattern, and this purl stitch is going to be the one that gets eliminated. So we're going to knit until we get to this purl column. We're going to knit the stitches as they present, which is really, once you've established a ribbing pattern, that's all you ever do is knit stitches as they present. You don't really have to think about, is this knit 2, purl 2 or knit 1, purl 1. You just work the stitches as they present. So here we are at this column of stitches, and what we want to do is we want to decrease this knit stitch together with that purl stitch and eliminate the purl stitch. So we want the knit stitch to end up on top. When we work a decrease, when this stitch is on top, the decrease is going to point to the left. When this stitch is on top, the decrease will point to the right. Since we want the knit stitch to be on top, we need a decrease that points to the left. That decrease is an SSK. So you slip 2 stitches one at a time as if to knit. That changes the stitch mount. Insert your left needle through those 2 stitches. You can see the working needle is pointing to the left. That reminds us that this is a decrease that is going to lean to the left. And when we complete it, we can see that the knit stitch is still on top and the other stitch is the one that ends up underneath. So now we're going to work across the stitches as they present, knit the knits and purl the purls. Okay, now we're approaching this marker. So we want to work this marked stitch together with the purl stitch. We want to eliminate this first purl stitch. So we can work this stitch here. And we want the knit stitch to be on top. So if we want this stitch to be on top, that's going to point to the right, and the decrease that points to the right is a knit two together. And again, you can see the needle points to the right, the working needle points to the right as you're working the two stitches together. And you can see that this knit stitch is the one that ended up on top, and the other stitch ended up behind it underneath. And then you just work the rest of the stitches as they present. So now that you have worked these decreases, what have you got? Well, you've got your knit two, purl two, knit two at the beginning of the row, but now you have purl one. You don't have purl two. You can't purl two and maintain the pattern. So what you're maintaining right here is the stitches as they've been established. Okay, so once again, we're going to work up until we get to this column, this marked column. And this time we're going to eliminate this purl stitch. So once again, we're going to work this knit stitch together with this purl stitch, and we want it to angle to the left. So we're going to work it just like we did before. We're going to work this as an SSK, and we're going to work the one over here as a knit two together. So now we want to eliminate this purl stitch, so we work the knit two together. So what do we have now? We've got knit two, purl two, knit two, but now we've got another two knit stitches. So we really have 4 knit stitches in a row here, and we have 4 knit stitches in a row here. So once again, we're going to work across until we get to this knit column, and we're going to work these 2 stitches together, and again an SSK. So each time in this particular situation, since we are using that knit column as the decrease, where it is going to remain on top, we're always working an SSK near the beginning of the row and a knit two together at the end of the row. The decreases are pointing toward the area changing in size. So they're pointing toward the center. And now we're getting to the end, so it's going to be these 2 stitches worked together and pointing toward the center. So knit 2 together. And at this point, we're down to 3 knits in a row instead of 4 knits in a row on each side. So now I'm about to do my last decrease to eliminate. It's my 4th decrease. And so now I'm back down to knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 on this side, or this edge. We've eliminated a full repeat on each edge, and so we are back down to knit 2, purl 2 all the way across. We could, if this were the end of the decreases, then we could continue on and the ribbing pattern would be maintained as it was originally established, just over fewer stitches. This chart represents what the ribbing originally looked like, and then it shows which stitches we eliminated with our decreases, but it doesn't show us what type of decreases were worked. If we look at this chart, we can see this is the same chart again, but here we can see, oh, up this line of knit stitches is where we worked our SSK decreases that are pointing toward the center, toward the area changing inside. And over here we have the knit 2 together decreases that were pointed toward the center or toward the area changing in size. But there is a different way of working the decreases. And that is, instead of working this stitch together with the stitch to its right, you work the stitch to be decreased with the stitch to its left over here, and over here you're working the stitch together to its right. So you see these decreases are pointing toward the edge. They're not pointing toward this area, they're pointing toward that area. And because we're not doing them in the same column of stitches each time, these decreases gradually move to the left and they change depending on what type of stitch is worked in that column. So that's what I'm going to show you this time. I'm going to keep the markers on this column of knit stitches. I could put the markers on the needle at this point, but I personally don't like markers on my needles, so I'm going to keep them on here. And what we're going to do this time, we're still going to be eliminating the stitch to the left of this knit column right here. But instead of working these two stitches together, we're going to work these two stitches together. This one is still going to end up on the bottom, so this one is going to end up on the top. And so because this one's going to end up on the top, it needs to point to the right. And because this one is going to end up on top of that one, this is going to point to the left. So we work the first 6 stitches in pattern because that final knit stitch is not going to be decreased out. We're going to work all the way up to this column of, including this column of stitches. And now we're going to decrease these 2 stitches together. And we want to maintain the pattern for the second stitch. The stitch that's on top, that's the pattern we're maintaining. And we want a decrease that points toward the edge. Now, if it were a knit stitch, that would be a knit 2 together. So when it's purls, it's purl 2 together. So now I've worked that together and I work all the way across to the next area of decrease. And so in this case, this purl stitch is going to be eliminated. So this purl stitch is going to be on top, and we're maintaining the stitch pattern for the whatever stitch is on top, we maintain that stitch pattern. So because it needs to point to the left, if that were a knit decrease, that would be SSK. So in this case, we use an SSP. So you start the same way as with an SSK, you slip 2 stitches, one at a time as if to knit, which remounts the stitches. Then you return them to the left-hand needle. Return them like this, pull this needle out, and now you need to purl them together through the back. So you need to move your yarn to the front. And the easiest way to purl 2 together through the back is you point your needle at yourself, and then you can get your working needle through those 2 stitches. And then you can purl them together. It's not the most fun decrease to work, but it does work. So once again, we're down to knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 1. So we worked stitches as they present. Once again, we're going to eliminate this purl stitch, but we're going to work it. We're going to do that by working it together with the knit to its left. So this is the stitch that needs to be on top. So when we work these 2 together, we're going to be doing a knit decrease. So we want to work these 2 stitches together and we want it to point to the right, and that would be a knit 2 together. We can remember that because when the needle is through the stitches, it points to the right. And now we have these 2 stitches to work together. We want the knit to be on top and we want it to point to the left. So that's an SSK. So at this point we have knit 2, purl 2, and then again we've got knit 4 together, purl 2, and a knit 4 together, purl 2, knit 2. Okay, so we want to decrease the 2 stitches that are to the left of this marker, and they're both knits, so we're going to be doing a knit 2 together that points to the right, and over here we're going to be doing an SSK that points to the left. And now we're back down to knit 2, purl 2, knit 3, purl 2, knit 3, purl 2, knit 2. So now we have our final set of decreases. And this time we need to work these 2 stitches together. The purl stitch has to be on top. It's going to be pointing to the right. That's a purl 2 together. And now we've come to the final decrease here. And again, we want to work those 2 stitches together, and this one has got to be on top. So that means if it's pointing to the left, that's an SSP. Slip 2 stitches, one at a time, as if to knit. Return them to the left needle, bring the yarn to the front, point the needle at myself so I can get the needle through those 2 stitches through the back, and then purl it. The ribbing pattern is maintained. You don't notice in the final result that you have 4 knit stitches in a row here. It doesn't bother you. There's a little difference in the result when you use the decreases that are pointing toward this column of stitches. Because you're using different kinds of decreases each time, in this situation you've got a purl two together or an SSP, where when they were always worked in the knit columns, the knit stitch was always on top. So you do get a little bit of a difference in the appearance of the decreased fabric, but if it's all worked the same, it's not going to be noticeable. It's noticeable here because they were worked in a different way. These were all worked in the knit stitches, and these were worked in different stitches as they went up the swatch. Today I showed you two different approaches for decreasing while maintaining a ribbing pattern. You can get great results with either choice, provided you select the correct decrease with the correct lean in order to maintain the stitch pattern. Not all decrease situations are the same, so in the next few weeks I'll demonstrate other methods of maintaining an established stitch pattern while decreasing or increasing for both texture patterns and color work. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.